Welcome to your Healing Place podcast with Linda and Mindy. It is our desire to address common concerns of how abortion and faith intersect in order to validate the emotional pain and grief that abortion can bring and give hope that recovery is possible. Welcome to the Your Healing Place podcast. Linda and I are here today with Jane Abbate. She is the author of Where Do Broken Hearts Go? Healing and Hope After Abortion, and the host of My Mentor Jane, which you can find on YouTube. So welcome, Jane. We're so glad you're here.
I'm thrilled to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So I just want you to tell us, share just a little bit about your road to abortion, what it looked like in your life, maybe some of the details, some of the things that led up to the crisis of having an abortion.
I was, and still am, the youngest of four girls in a family out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was raised in the Catholic Church. My parents were good people. They instilled values in me. We went to church. I received all the sacraments in the Catholic Church. And it was really important to me to be a good girl. My dad was pretty distant, didn't show much affection, didn't show much interest in his daughters. And so doing well in school, behaving were ways that I could get his attention and praise, which I was really hungry and thirsty for. My mom was really strict. She was emotionally erratic. I mean, some days she was just loving, and other days she could be really nasty and cruel. So, again, keeping the peace, being a good girl, not causing any trouble, kept at least my part of the home pretty calm. So, it was a lot of growing up about performance, pleasing, and just being good and not causing any disruption. So that's the way I tried to live my life. And unfortunately, in my family, there was because I didn't have any brothers, and my dad and mom just didn't take the initiative. There was no discussion about relationships with the opposite sex, how to date, how to think about it. I guess they just assumed that I would know to kind of quote unquote behave. But, not talking about it and not giving me, helping me build confidence. I was really super shy. Never had a date in high school, didn't go to the prom, that sort of stuff. So when I went off to college, a local state college, I was really just ready to be different. In fact, I made an oath that I am not going to be shy anymore. And so on the one hand, that was great because I made a lot of friends and the social life with my girlfriends was terrific. And I loved college. The downside of that is that I was on my own when it came to boys. And so I would go to the frat parties and kind of watched and looked around and, oh, it must seem like to get the boys' attention, you must drink and, get real physical with them. And so that eventually led me to being sexually active pretty early in college. And I didn't think about it, but I just knew that I was hungry for a man's attention. And when you get physical and you sleep with them, you get it, at least temporarily.
Right.
I did meet a guy in college towards the end, a really nice young man. And we did fall in love and we were having sex. And right after I got out of college, I found that I was pregnant. And, I just remember being totally panicked. It was a physical experience of panic. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it was the surprise of it, although of course it shouldn't have been. I was on the pill, but I didn't take it very regularly. I don't know what that risky stuff was about. But anyway, I knew that while I really cared for him, I didn't want to marry him, or at least I didn't feel prepared. And so in panic, I looked up, I don't even remember now how I would have known where to look up, but I found a clinic in downtown Pittsburgh that offered abortions. And I don't even think I knew that word before then. But the enemy, Satan, was happy to guide me there. And I didn't tell my boyfriend, I didn't tell anybody. I got myself to the clinic and I had my first abortion. I remember very little about that. And I do know that some months later, I did tell my boyfriend, and he was just devastated because he loved me. And I just didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to talk about it. And I was starting to date someone else on like on the side, on the sly. And so I broke up with the father of that baby, devastated him. I just, when I think about it, Mindy, I wanted to put it behind me. And breaking up with him, I think, was one way I could like cut it out of my life. He wasn't in my life anymore, so that abortion must not be in my life. I don't think that was a real conscious thought, but I do believe that was part of breaking off. Um, was dating around at that point, and a couple of years later, ended up getting pregnant to a guy I met at a disco. I was dating casually. I liked him, but this was,
Yeah. I
we
have to
we
interrupt
might,
just for 1 second.
yeah.
I'm so sorry. This is such a serious conversation, but the word disco is just not something we use anymore. So if you could just really
Takes us
quickly,
back.
yeah, just share what that is for those that
Thank
don't
you.
know.
Well, thank you, because that was in the 70s and early 80s, 1970s, early 80s. It was a club that you would go to and you'd listen to John Travolta and the Bee Gees and dance and
Dance.
drink
Dance.
and
Yeah.
just have a great time and wear halter dresses and high heels and
Yeah.
just dance and really hook up with guys if you wanted to. And so partying, it was partying. So this guy was, again, he was a nice guy, but I had very little relationship with him. And again, found myself pregnant and thought, oh my gosh, I don't, he's a nice guy, but I don't really even know him. So that time I went to my gynecologist and he said, I don't do abortions, but I'll recommend you to someone. And that abortion I had in a hospital. I went in the night before, stayed overnight, had the abortion all by myself, didn't tell anybody again, didn't tell the father of the baby, and had the abortion the next day. When I look back, I think I must have been a lot further along in my pregnancy, which was probably one of the reasons why he referred me to a doctor and to have it done in a hospital. And there was a lot of bleeding afterward. And I was, living by myself. And I just remember being so very afraid, but not having anybody to call because nobody knew what happened. So that was some pretty rough nights.
Did the father of the baby know about that one? No.
No, and I never told him.
Okay.
We broke up, I think very shortly afterward. I was dating somebody else, and that was again, I wasn't committed to him, and he was part of something I wanted to forget.
Yeah.
I didn't, those first two abortions wasn't thinking about it. I remember even less of the second abortion than the first, the actual experience of it. And I see now how that like amnesia or that forgetting, that numbness, were all signals of the trauma.
Yeah.
But I didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
So I picked myself back up. I was working in banking at the time. I was worked in HR, human resources, and I was rising up through the ranks, doing well successfully. Um, Proud of myself in my career. I was being a good girl on the outside, wasn't I? An executive, nice apartment, fancy car. But my family was wondering, hey, Janie, here you are, 28, 29 years old, 30, you're not married. You're not even looking like you're getting married. And that's because I wasn't having any serious or meaningful relationship.
Do you
Well,
Jane, may I just ask real quick, do
Yeah,
you think that
sure,
had to
sure.
do with the abortions at all? Were you hesitant to get close to somebody like that, or was that other things
Uh, Actually, I think it wasn't so much hesitancy as desperation.
to stay
And
away from
so
somebody?
so if somebody would pay attention to me, I
Yeah,
would date him, uh, sleep with them. But
yeah.
nothing was, they were looking for somebody to sleep with. So the men weren't looking for a relationship. So I was picking men who weren't the, right material, marriage material. Um, I know trying to get that connection to, and I think as I've read more about this and this whole topic of trauma, it's called trauma reenactment,
Hmm.
with this idea where you repeat, you get yourself into the same situation over and over again, unconsciously trying to resolve it in a way that it turns out differently. Um, and because, one abortion, two abortions,
That's a
but
crazy cycle to be on.
yeah, it's a terrible cycle, and it's unconscious. It's not like I knew I was trying to make it turn out differently. So anyway, back to why I wasn't getting married or in any relationships. It was because I was making poor choices out of desperation.
Okay.
And I really was not, I was still going to the Catholic Church. At some points during this time, I was teaching what they called CCD or Sunday school.
Hmm.
All the outward appearances were that she's doing great, a little high strung, she can fly off the handle, she's pretty anxious, she's got a hot temper, she's a perfectionist, all that stuff. Um, I was seeing that as, oh, I'm a good executive. I demand quality and excellence and so on and so forth. But really, those were signs of, just some of the, some of the trauma and the aftermaths of abortion. Um, I finally got to the point at about age 30 where I did become involved in a serious relationship, and I fell madly in love with this man. And we dated for a couple of years. And then at around uh, age 32, I found out I was pregnant for the third time. And there was a big wrinkle, though, this time. The father of the baby was married, had some kids. And I remember I went to him and I told him I was pregnant. The only time I went to the father of the baby first and told him I was pregnant. And I said to him, and don't worry about it, I'll take care of it.
Hmm.
And I think about the fact that I didn't even give him a choice to reject me.
Do you feel like maybe you were just hoping he would say something different?
I do. I
Hmm.
do. And I also believe that, Linda, I was scared to death that he might say something because he was married
Hmm.
and it would bring the whole affair and all the shame that comes with that out into the open. So that fear of being exposed, not just of the pregnancy, but of this affair, I'm
Hmm.
sure was looming there.
Hmm.
And he was, I'm sure he was shocked and panicked as well. I do believe he really cared for me. Um, However, I gave him a perfect out. And so I made the appointment at the clinic. He was supposed to pick me up and take me. I waited in my apartment the day he was supposed to pick me up, and he never showed. I called his office and said, can you interrupt him? I'm told his secretary I'm like need to talk to him, and she came back on the phone and said he told me to tell you he's busy in a meeting and he'll talk to me later. Wow. I mean,
Hmm.
I can't. I looking back at Jane at age 32 and seeing how devastating that was, I just can't even imagine. And that abortion, I don't remember anything about it. I think that was like the biggest insult, the biggest blow. I had it at a clinic somewhere. All I remember is the next thing I remember is sitting at a restaurant eating Chinese food with him. I
Oh,
guess he picked me up. I don't even know.
oh,
6 months after that, he broke up with me and returned. I mean, he left the city with his wife and family, and that was the end of the relationship.
wow.
So there I was at 32 years old, single, and had experienced 3 abortions. And I just remember so clearly after that last abortion and after he had left, being devastated and numb going through the rest of my life for many, many years.
Had you ever
So,
wanted to have children? Was that a desire of yours?
yeah, absolutely, Linda. I had their names picked out.
Wow.
Linda and Tommy, old-fashioned names now.
Yes.
Gonna have a girl and a boy. I was a babysitter. You know, I loved to babysit. Oh yeah, I was gonna be a mom.
So at 32,
And
you're thinking the clock's ticking here. Yeah.
I don't even think I was thinking the clock's ticking. It was just, oh my gosh. And I still was putting it out of my mind. It was like a compartment, like I guess maybe a metaphor is a door that I wasn't going to open because I didn't want to visit what was there. And so from age 32 to roughly age 44, so for another part of my life, another 22 years of my life, I never told anybody except one person, but I'll come back to that. So I really threw myself into my career. I did meet someone a couple years after that breakup, and I fell in love with him, and we got married. I did tell him about the abortions before we were married. I don't think he knew how to think about it or talk about it, and I was kind of like, no big, I hate to minimize it, but it was like, I just need you to know this about me because
Mhm.
I was not in touch with how it was affecting me. So how could it affect him? Right. Um, but it had an enormous impact on our marriage. I look back and I was still reeling from the breakup, from the father of the third baby. I had so much anger and rage that I would have these bursts of rage at my husband. I resented so much of him. It was almost like I was looking for what was wrong. We tried to have a baby. I wasn't getting pregnant. But as our relationship deteriorated, I became less and less interested in having a baby. I was more concerned about how we would do that together and raise a baby together. And in the end, we weren't for the last 3 or 4 years of our marriage, we weren't even sleeping together, maybe longer than that. So by the time we divorced, at that point I was 55 or 56, and my childbearing years were over. I do think I never had it checked, but I do think that I think I may not have been able to have a child after 3 abortions. I'm not sure, but my instincts tell me that I probably was infertile. And I had some other complications later where I had a full hysterectomy. Um, so
So
I don't know if I would have been able to be pregnant.
if I could just step in a moment, you're sharing so many amazing, I mean, hard things, amazing things as I think about where you've been and where you are now and what God is doing through your life. And so I kind of want to just make that shift so we can definitely start to talk about some of those great things that God is doing in your life. And
Mhm.
so to start that off, if you could, just help us to understand how you knew you needed healing. What was that turning point where you took your step into healing and got
Yeah,
you on this road that you're on now today?
yeah. I am convinced that I'm convinced of 2 things. That as my marriage was falling apart, my anxiety was through the roof. I was going through walking depression. I was so unhappy in my job and I was doing great, but I didn't like it. So much pressure. as I said, my husband and I weren't, that the Lord was bringing me to my knees. He was allowing kind of the consequences. I was doing a lot of drinking, which I haven't mentioned. So I think the Lord allowed the stress and pressure that was building because of my performance anxiety and perfectionism to prove I was a good girl, even though I had had these abortions. So that was rising, and just all the dysfunction in my marriage and the drinking. He allowed that to wear me down to a point where I was uh, crying a lot, I was drinking a lot, and I didn't think I could really function anymore in my work. And so I think there were two things. I think the Lord allowed those circumstances, and I believe the Holy Spirit at the right time showed me some opportunity through my church in a bulletin, the Rachel's Vineyard retreats.
Ah.
And I saw this little notice about, hurting from abortion. And I remember sitting in the church thinking, oh my God, everybody must be able to see it's me, like the light. She's the one. And it took me probably a couple of times, like probably, I don't know, could have been a year or two, where I know the Holy Spirit was saying, this is you. This is for you. My life, my marriage, my work, everything was on the outside looking good, but really not. And so I called the number, and the women there were wonderful and compassionate. And it was the first time, well, I had told my husband and I had told the father, but it was the first time I talked about it. And once I entered that weekend, that was the beginning of the end of that old life. And then the beginning of my healing and transformation.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you worked with, or you didn't, we haven't got there. I'm jumping ahead. You
That's
got
okay.
involved with Rachel's Vineyard in terms of being a participant. And then what led
Yes.
you to take steps to work with them?
That retreat was the beginning point of starting to peel the layers of the onion of my hurt and pain. And I was so grateful for what hope, for what healing and what hope I had. I wanted to reach out and help other women. And I was so admiring of the women who led the retreat that I wanted to help them in any way. So I started financially helping them. And then Rachel's Vineyard was opening up in Pittsburgh, more retreats. And so the head of that Catholic Charities called me and said, we need some help. Would you want to join the team?
Mm.
So I was then on the retreat team, a part of, let's say, delivering the support on the weekends. And through that, for many years, I was continuing to do my grieving and my healing on those retreats as much as supporting others. And after about 3 or 4 years of that, again, I believe the Holy Spirit was kind of inkling that, there's more that you can do. And I'd always wanted to write a book. And so I, in the meantime, had met my second husband, Bill, and I had told him about my abortions, and he was uh, kind and compassionate and loving. And we ended up getting married. And he said, if you want to write this book, whatever you need. And so, Where Do Broken Hearts Go? My book, it's approached from the way that I needed to heal, which was to look at my emotions. And so the book is about 19 different emotions that I have experienced, still do experience, on the abortion healing journey. So I wrote the book, and so I lead retreats, or I participated in the retreats. I run small groups with my book, and then now, about 3 years ago, again, I felt led to, people don't read as much. They don't want to read as much, perhaps. And there's this thing called YouTube. And so that's when I decided to take what I had been writing and put it into YouTube videos. And that's how my mentor, Jane, the YouTube channel, was born and has been operating for over 3 years now.
I love that. And so initially my mentor Jane started out as just kind of a general mentorship, if I'm correct.
That's
and
right.
then the Lord has shifted that just a little bit too. Just talk about that a minute.
Mm-hmm. You know, Mindy, I've been public for a long time. Once I got into being part of the Rachel's Vineyard retreat, and certainly when I wrote my book, that's when I'll tell anybody about my abortions. So he was preparing me to get comfortable with talking openly like I have today with some of my darkest sin and most shameful moments and decisions. And so getting to YouTube, however, is a whole different thing.
Yes.
So I think he helped me dip my toes into putting video out there on YouTube that presumably will be there forever. People find it, and talking about, sort of general self-help things about relationships and getting along with your boss and being a better leader, that kind of thing. And so as I was dipping my toe in that water for about a year, and I was thinking, okay, now where do I go with this channel? Because I had also been a leadership development coach, I could talk about a lot of that. I really believe the Holy Spirit said, okay, Jane, now it's time to do your real work. And that is to reach out and support women and men who've experienced abortion, to help them understand that there is hope and healing. And most importantly, that he died for them. He died for their sins of
Amen.
abortion. And he's waiting to share his mercy and love with them.
That's right.
So that was about 2 years ago. And so since then, all the videos are focused on healing and hope after abortion.
That's beautiful, because really the most important thing isn't the particular sin that we have, whether it's abortion or pornography or adultery or divorce, whatever you want to put in there, sexual promiscuity. It's the need for Jesus. We all have a need for Jesus. We all have sin, and it's the same at the cross. So, all right. So you can find Jane's book out on Amazon or other places, I'm sure, but Where Do Broken Hearts Go? Hope and Healing After Abortion, and my mentor Jane out on YouTube. Jane, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was inspired by the many conversations had through the years with women struggling from the emotional pain associated with abortion. Thank you for allowing us into your healing journey. Subscribe on major platforms where podcasts can be heard. Learn more about virtual abortion recovery healing at www.anevenplace.com. The link is in the show notes.